everyone, it's EJ from iDesign.com, and I'm coming to you straight from the lynda.com offices. I am here recording a new Cinema 4D course that will hopefully release sometime soon. But today I'm going to be going over how to use the pose morph tag when it comes to animating characters. And so if you've seen my latest tutorial, I animated the little Baymax from Big Hero 6 character and used the jiggle deformer to show how the jiggle deformer can be used to even help spice up your character animations. But I had a lot of people inquiring on, number one, how to actually rig Baymax, but another how I used the pose morph tag to actually animate the Baymax character. I'm probably going a little bit out of order, but let me know if you want to see how to animate or how to actually rig Baymax, and if I get enough people wanting to know that about, because character rigging is very it's unique to each character rig or character model you're building. So there's plenty of tutorials out there on how to rig characters, but if you are interested in how I rigged Baymax, let me know in the comments section, and if I get enough people wanting it, I will do it. I'm here for you guys. But so let's actually jump in how I use the pose morph tag to animate him. And if you're not familiar with the pose morph tag, I have another tutorial on my site using the pose morph tag on how to morph between objects, 2D objects. And if you haven't watched that, be sure to watch it because it kind of introduces you to the basics of what the pose morph tag can do. So I'm going to be building off of that tutorial and kind of just jumping in how to use the pose morph tag when it relates to character animation and things to watch out for and good stuff like that. So let's just go ahead and jump right in.
All right, so we got our little Baymax rig here, and what the character object does is it creates a really nice setup for how you can rig your character. And maybe I'll go into depth with that in a future tutorial, but for right now, just note there is a main Baymax character object, and then underneath it we have the root, which is just controlling the position of all of our little joints and the whole character system, IK system here. And then we have a spine, and then legs and arms, and then we have all these controllers. Now when I move these controllers around, since I already skinned and weighted my character, and my weighting is not the best, I'm still learning how to do all this stuff, but if you do all that correctly, you should have these little controllers. You got the hip controller, and they're all in these little bounding box kind of things. So this is like the chest, and then we have the head, so the top of the head. So we can turn his head and rotate it up and down. And then we got this little part here with the neck, so we can also move the head and turn it, all that kind of stuff. And then we have the legs and all this good stuff. But what we're going to do is use a pose morph tag and animate this guy. And what we're going to do is put the pose morph tag on this character object and then just start moving stuff, and it'll be stored in the pose morph tag, and then we're just going to blend and morph between all of our different poses. So if you go to my website, we have basically he's posing between two poses where he's putting hands up on the right and then to the left. And then he's dipping his hips, which is actually controlled by another pose. So really, there's 3 poses that I'm blending through to create this animation. So this animation was basically created with 6 keyframes, which is pretty awesome, and that's all due to the power of the pose morph. So what we're going to do is we're not going to store any information here, because with the skin object, all the movement is being driven by me moving these controllers that are all contained in this character object. So the character object's moving everything here through the skin object, or the skin object, and so that's why we're going to put the pose morph on the character object here. So I'm going to right click, go to character tags, pose morph, and now is where the fun begins. So we're going to go and choose all the things we need to mix together. And I know we're going to need position, because we're going to need to store me actually moving the position and rotation of all these little controller boxes and all that stuff. So we're going to enable position, rotation, parameters, And some of the information is connected with Expresso and user data in the character object. So I'm going to choose character data and also hierarchy. So that's going to take care of everything underneath this character object. So you need to make sure there's so many objects underneath this character object, and I'm only showing these objects right here now to be visible, but there's a lot of stuff in there. And since we're putting the pose morph tag on this whole entire system, you need to be really careful with what you're touching and moving, and that you don't accidentally move something you didn't mean to move. So now we can, with all of our mixing states or mixing parameters saved, we can go into our tag, and we got the base pose with just the little T pose here, and it automatically creates a first pose. So I'm just going to double click this and rename this arms right. So this is going to be where the arms are going to be up and over his head and to the right. And so let's just go and just start moving these controllers around. So I'm going to move them via position, and then I can also rotate these controllers to kind of turn his wrist like so. And I'm going to grab his other arm and move it up and rotate his wrist. And then I'm going to grab his hips controller, and just kind of move it off to the side. And I can move it up and down as well. So right about there is probably good. And then get his little chest controller here, move it over to the right, and rotate just a tad bit. And then we can still go and grab these arm controllers here. Get over here, come on. And just move them even further. So he's waving his hands over to the right side here. Let's grab his left, actually that's his right arm, and move it over to the right here. So now he's raising his hands over to this side, and then we can grab his little head controller and kind of rotate this a little bit. And then there's also, if I zoom in here, there's a neck controller, and I can rotate this to the side like he's leaning his head over or up even. So that looks good. So a lot of this is just like, how would a normal person be positioned when they're raising their arms to the right? Like, how is their weight shifting in their hips? Stuff like that, you know? So it's a lot of just, character study as well. And is he leaning so far over that a real person would like just tip over? So you need to keep those kind of things in mind. So I think that's pretty dang close for a good pose where he's waving his arms to the right over here. So that is our first pose. Now what we're going to do is create a second pose. And we're going to snap back to the original base pose here, which is fine. And we'll just rename this arms left. So we're going to do the same exact thing and pose him with his arms over to the left. So we're just going to start, again, moving the hips, rotating it a little bit, and moving this chest over, just like that, and move his arms up over to this side, and rotate his hands, and move his other arm up over to the side over here, rotate his wrist, grab his chest again, and rotate that. And he's wiggling it just a little bit. And grab his head, rotate his head a little bit, and then try to get, I grabbed it, his little neck controller there, and rotate his head slightly. Let's see, this is coming along. Move the chest over a little bit. Let's move this arm over as well. I think his neck's a little bit too rotated. Cool. So like I said, it's a lot of just getting the pose to look kind of believable and realistic and not like really whacked out looking. So if his head's like all the way like this, like that's not looking too hot. Looks like he's kind of passed out or about to get passed out. So I think that's looking pretty good. I think that's good. We got this nice curved shape being formed with his body, so it doesn't look like he'll tip over really. uh, cool. So that's good for the left arm. Yeah, that looks good. Yes. I'm going to leave that alone. Tweak forever. So, all right, so we got the arms right, arm left, and those are looking good. And there's a base pose. And so what we're going to do now is create the dipping of the hips, or the hip dip. The dance craze. And so what we're going to do is, again, add a new pose. Let's name this the hip dip. And simply what we're going to do is just animate his hips. So what's going to happen is that the pose morph tag is going to analyze everything and see what's changed between the base pose and the current pose that you're looking for. So if I just dip his hips just slightly, and his chest maybe, I only move those two things, right? So let's actually go in and go to the animate pose. And right now, what the heck is he doing? He's doing a giant high five to himself or something. I don't know. But the reason why it's so messed up is because we have all of these poses at 100%. So all the poses and all the movements we just added are all exaggerated and adding up on top of one another. So what we need to do is actually just bring down the strengths of all these. And if I just bring up the arms right, you'll see that we now have our arms to the right. And then if I bring this down and bring up the arms left, my arms will now pose morph to that pose. And if we do the hip dip, just his hips are dipping there. And actually, with this, I actually forgot to do this. When I did the hip dip part here, I actually grabbed, let's see, its head controller, and I also moved his head kind of down. Just because when you're kind of dipping, maybe your head, like the momentum, kind of carries your head down a little bit. So I think I added just a little bit of a head tilt. So again, it's just really fine tuning it. So making sure you're thinking of all the character movements, and then when you're actually moving, like, does your head dip forward or tilt forward slightly when you would do a movement like that? So let's go back into the animate. And so my hip dip not only controls the chest and the hip, but also slightly tilting the head. So just really subtle stuff, but when you actually animate, it actually goes a long way in believable motion. So now we have all of our poses stored in some kind of state, and now we just have to animate all of these positions here. So what we're going to do is, let's start out with the arms right, and we're going to hit a keyframe. So that's going to be the starting position. And then we're going to go and at frame, let's go to frame 20, and we're going to bring our arms down, and then we're going to start to bring our arms up over here. So we got arms up and down, but we're seeing where we're kind of, that's not working because we have a part in here where there's no pose, there's no morph we're actually morphing to. We're actually just going to the base pose. So we need to make sure that we never just go to this main pose. So what we're going to need to do is actually have the arm left and arm right strength morph at the same time. So look at what happens. So we're going to, zoom in here a little bit more. So we're going to just morph between the arms left and arms right. And you might need a little bit of fine tuning because you can kind of see right in there at some point the arm, his right arm is a little bit down too much. So it's bending kind of oddly. So let's actually take care of that. And what we're going to do to fix that is to just in this pose right here, we're just going to move the arm out a little bit more. So let's go back into edit mode, and let's see, it was this pose right here that we need to edit. And I'm going to just grab this arm over here and just move it out over here just a little bit more. Maybe move this up as well. So now let's see if that fixed that issue. So let's just move between here, and that kind of fixed it. But you can see it's still going down right here, and I almost think it's because of this left or this right pose. So let's go and go back into our edit, go to this right pose, and let's bring this arm up a little bit more, and that should fix it. Okay, cool. So I think that looks pretty good. So then in the middle of the pose though, we're going to need that little hip dip pose to come into play. So let's get some hippy dippy right about in the middle. So I'm going to set a pose for the hip dip, and at 10 frames in, I'll make him kind of squat down, maybe not the whole, maybe not the full strength, but maybe just a little bit right, maybe 45%. Let's do that. And then turn down the hip dip strength. So we'll see a slight kind of like hipping or hip dip going on right here. And actually, let's bring up the strength a little bit more. So let's go to our timeline. Let's bring up the strength. And let's see if this looks okay. So that looks a lot better. So what was that? 90%? Oh, I'm a dummy. I should have just did 100%. Cool. And the thing with the pose morph is you can keep going beyond 100% and get really exaggerated like movements based on how high your strength is. So think of it like an effector. If you have a random effector with small values and you bring the strength up really much or a lot more past 100%, that randomness is just going to keep going and moving off into space. So same thing with this pose morph strength here. So again, I can, this is what, 0, or here's 100%. So I can keep going, and remember that's how his arms got stretched in that original pose when everything was mixed, because it was just adding on top of each other and going beyond 100%. So now you can just go and with all these movements, just kind of, if you want to fine tune them and have him maybe when he's over here, maybe have a little overshoot. So let's just duplicate these keyframes over here and have a little bit of overshoot on the curves. And maybe a little bit on the hip dip. And maybe that, I don't know. Let's see, what does that do? So yeah, so now we have his arms kind of stretch out and do a little bit of overshoot and go back. And then let's drag these keyframes over here. Bring it to frame 60. Maybe a little bit in. And let's move this, the hip dip keyframe over here. So what we should have is him go from left to right, hold it, overshoot, and then right or left to right. So right to left, left to right. And then what I would do is just loop this, and that's how I created the animated GIF there. So again, we're going to get this little overshoot and just kind of tweak these curves so it's nice and smooth motion. You can see right here, maybe his arms are going a little bit too stretched out there, but you know what? This is just a robot made with, or it's an inflated robot, so you know what? He can get away with stretching like that. Not too concerned with real believability here, because this is a cartoon character after all. So yeah, so I mean that's the basics of how I animated Baymax with the pose morph. And then again, what I did is add the SSD, or the SDS subdivision surface, and that kind of smoothed everything out. And then what I did was, again, I go over this in my jiggle tutorial, but I added the jiggle, so he kind of has some jiggly motion going on. So it helps add with that overshoot. And the smoothing kind of just stretches everything out. So you can see in the smoothing here, right in his arms where his arms pinch, this just kind of loosens that skin or the polygon mesh. So it just kind of loosens it and stretches it out. And I kind of just zoomed in on and created a weight map that just took care of the little pinching that was occurring in his arms. So you can see how his arms were getting kind of really small there. And I just used the smoothing deformer, which just kind of smooths everything out and relaxes those polygons by using this kind of strength value here. So you can see with the weight map, you can adjust the strength there. So smoothing deformer is really handy when animating characters, when you want to relax the polygon mesh there. And then the jiggle, just adding that extra kind of jiggliness to Baymax. And that is how I animated the Baymax character with Pose Morph. Now I know I glossed over a lot of just how to set up the Baymax character. And again, if you want to see that, let me know. It's going to be quite a hefty tutorial, but I think it might be worthwhile just because, like I mentioned off the top, it's very hard to kind of figure out how to watch other tutorials. And most tutorials might have a weird cartoon character that has 4 arms or has 1 leg, or just shaped very differently. And I know there's no tutorials out here for the shape of like a Baymax, so I just kind of had to fly by the seat of my pants and figure it out on my own with some help from some very smart Cinema 4D character riggers as well. So I mean, there's a lot of gotchas, but maybe I'll go through and maybe you'll learn something through my my method of madness of how I got this guy to work. But I hope you enjoyed. Again, Pose Morph. Hope you learned a little bit more about the Pose Morph. And again, if you haven't yet, be sure to watch my Where Is It? Let's go to tutorials. And so there is my jiggle deformer that I mentioned just briefly. And here is my morph in between objects using the Pose Morph tag. So the Pose Morph is a lot more useful than just with character animation, and I actually used it for this kind of stuff first before I even did character animation. But I'm really trying to get more into character animating and forcing myself to do it because I'm sure it'll help me in just motion graphics kind of stuff. And I believe that that's why it's probably important that I do a little character rigging thing, even if it's a little bit more simplified and not Baymax. But enough blabbling. Thanks again for watching, everyone. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. Hit me in the comments, and I'd love to see what you come up with using the Pose Morph. Again, I have the project file. I'm giving it away on my website. So if you go to my tutorial, go all the way down and click this link to download the animated Baymax character rig. And it would be really cool to see what you guys have him doing. So love to have you guys give Baymax some new dance moves here. So if you make anything, be sure to send me and show me. All right, and that's it for me. Thanks for watching again, guys, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.